Hello, everyone, and welcome to Dream Leapers with Harriet Cole. I am so excited to be with you today. You know how I get when I have a really, really good guest, especially a great author, and I've had to dig in and read. I just want to share with you who this person is. You will be as excited as I. Today, we are going to welcome the Vice President of Digital Content at the Grio and a CNN political analyst. She is Natasha Alford. You all may know her as she reports news affecting the African American community. Her work has been featured in publications like the New York Times, The Guardian, Vogue, and Oprah Mag. That's right. She's interviewed all kinds of people. Now, among them, Vice President Kamala Harris, who went to my alma mater, Howard University, and Congresswoman Maxine Waters. Natasha was named Emerging Journalist of the Year by the National Association of Black Journalists, that's NABJ, in 2018, and she has received grants from the Pulitzer Center for Crisis Reporting and a Black Voices for Black Justice grant. With a master's degree in broadcast journalism from Northwestern University and a BA in social studies from Harvard University, her education and experience are impressive, and I'm pretty sure she's in school right now getting another master's. She's going to tell us about that. Natasha mentors aspiring journalists and students, but right now, why we're excited is that she just released her new book, American Negra, published by HarperCollins, and we're going to talk all about it. So please join me in welcoming Natasha Alford.
Hi, Harriet. It's so wonderful to be a part of this conversation. I'm just honored to be on the show today.
Well, thank you and congratulations.
Thank you. It feels amazing. It feels like a coming out party.
Well, you know, I have lived in New York City for decades. New York City, mainly in Harlem, very much adjacent to what used to be a Puerto Rican community. You know, now it's Puerto Rican and Dominican. But number one, I don't speak Spanish, and I'm mad at myself for that. But number two, there's something that you talk about a lot in your book. You know, in America, forever, we have looked at race as black and white. You know, that's when people talk about race and racism, they talk about black and white. They don't talk that much about people who are whatever, Latino, Latinx, Hispanic, whatever. And you talk about that in your book, how you kind of break that down. And so as I was reading your book, Natasha, it was such an incredible education to learn about my neighbors, to learn the stories through your eyes and your experience of people who I feel like I should know because I've lived here this long. And many of us do not know people of Latin descent, Puerto Ricans in particular, even though in New York City, we are right next to each other. Why do you think that is?
Wow. Well, your observation about proximity was really one of the motivations for this book. I wanted to write about shared history because the reality is African Americans and Latinos, and again, that's a huge term because so many people fall underneath that, but Puerto Ricans in particular, Puerto Ricans, Dominicans, we often live in the same neighborhoods. And that's not by accident. It's the reality of segregation, right? Means that often, you know, Black people had been forced into certain neighborhoods or areas, told that they couldn't move to other spaces. And so through migration, we have two peoples, and in my case, African American and Puerto Rican, who went to the North seeking opportunities, ending up in proximity, you know, going to the same schools, often sharing the same space. But the reason why many of us don't connect is because of race in America and the way that it works. Because when people come to this country, they see that African Americans are discriminated against. We are often put on the bottom of social caste, right? Or the social totem pole. And so even if they share the same DNA, right? They have melanin, they look just like us. Sometimes they try to distance themselves because they don't want to be racialized in the same way. And they learn that that is a strategy. A lot of ethnic groups and immigrants who will come to America try to position themselves in opposition to African Americans, to say that we are different because they
Right.
don't want the stigma. So I think some of it is because of racism, just plain and simple, that we don't interact. But I also wanted to show that there were moments in history where African Americans and Latinos, Puerto Ricans in particular, did work together.
Hmm.
We're in political coalitions together. We made things happen through that unity. And so the question is, how can we generate more of that?
Yeah, I love your book. I want you to know it's so
Thank you.
well written. You know, I just dove in, and you really have to read every word because you craft your stories really beautifully. And so you take us right into the experiences. And as I say, I learned a lot. And, when I look at you and me, we are virtually the same color, right?
Yeah.
And interestingly for me, so I'm African American, but my mother's side, I am 90% sure that my grandmother's father was white British.
Mm,
My grandmother was a white-skinned Black woman. She called herself colored. So there's no reason to call herself that unless it was true, because she didn't get any benefit from being colored, right? But
right.
we live in this culture that just tries to divide us in every possible way,
Hmm.
to pit us against each other. You write in the book about your hair and how, you have a mixture of your mother's and your father's hair, and how sometimes that was good and sometimes it wasn't. Can the journey of a woman of color and her hair is one of the most fraught journeys ever. But
Yes.
can you take us into your experience as you were coming into ownership and like, love, hate with your hair?
Yes. So that chapter is called Pelo Bueno, which just translates to good hair.
Mm.
And in both cultures, there's good hair,
Oh
right?
yeah.
African Americans, we know what is considered good hair. And the same in Latin America. Good hair is the straighter your hair is, the closer to a Eurocentric sort of beauty standard, that is what is considered beautiful. What was fascinating though was because of the texture of my hair, which again, you and I, we have the same kind of texture going on here. The texture, the length. I was often praised in the African American
Mhm.
community for having beautiful hair. But when you go over to the Latino culture, it's actually not good enough. Good hair is to
What's
be
straight enough?
right. It wasn't straight enough. My cousins, my Puerto Rican cousins, they had the bone straight hair, down to their butt. Like that was considered more beautiful. That's what you saw in commercials. That's what you saw in magazines. So I operated in this world where, I step in one direction and my hair is considered beautiful and exotic, and I step in the other direction and it marks me as a Black girl.
Mhm.
And so living in upstate New York, growing up in segregated upstate New York, which is very Black and white, I actually found myself trying to assimilate. And so I started perming my hair because I wanted to look more African American and to blend in, rather than to be marked as somehow different. And so I truly didn't see my texture again, my natural texture, until later in college when I did the big chop. So that's years of never truly seeing my hair and being comfortable. And even when I started television, I was wearing my hair straight. It wasn't until recently that I said, I feel comfortable. I live more comfortably just letting my hair be the way it is. So it's a journey that a lot of, I think, women can relate to. But what we share in
Absolutely.
common is the pressure to straighten our hair.
It's an incredible pressure. I remember when I was growing up in Baltimore, very segregated, 20 years before you. And we all permed our hair. I mean, I think my mother didn't let us do it until high school, but some kids did it even earlier. And when I got to college, as I said, Howard University, I let my hair go natural. I remember coming home one day, Natasha, and my father, who was very strict, said, he looked at me. My hair was, wild, but it was curly. And this is way before we had all the products we have now. So it was dry, I'm sure. And he
Mhm.
said, "You can't come to the table looking like this And he said, go, there's a comb in the bathroom, go comb your hair. I will
Mm.
never forget, because I was so mad at him. I didn't even come home for a long time. I was just like, I'm not talking to you anymore. I was so mad. Now I understand.
Mhm.
My father grew up in the segregated South. He was a tall, dark-skinned Black man. He understood, you, in order to get somewhere, you had to maintain this status quo. You certainly could not have your hair wild, right? And
Yeah.
so he didn't understand. He was trying to protect me. It made me mad, but he was trying to protect me. And I think what we're seeing from one generation to the next, there is an evolution, and still it's hard. I'll tell you one other thing. My daughter, who is now 20, but when she was in elementary school, there came a time when she was the only Black child in her class.
Mm.
She went to a small private school, and she would cry unless I would blow her hair out to go to school, because she was the only one with curly hair.
Yeah.
And I said, girl, don't you realize you can wear your hair every way? And it didn't work until there were more students in the class for her to feel ownership. It took a long time. And I'm like, but look at mine. And I had been wearing my hair spiky. So I said, nope, I'm taking the chemicals out. I'm wearing my hair curly so you can see I have it too. But this hair thing, I love that you talked about it, because it's still real. Generation after generation, we battle with identity, and hair has a lot to do with it.
You know what's fascinating, Harriet? So, if you've ever been to Dominican salon, they know
Oh,
how to
yeah.
straighten hair. You know how many, so many Black girls, Black American
Oh,
girls go to
yes.
Dominicans. Well, they learned how to perfect it because of that pressure, that colonial pressure, right? To press the Black out, press the
Yeah.
African out, so you can move up in society. Right
Yeah.
now in Puerto Rico, there is a fight to enact Crown Act legislation because people are experiencing discrimination for wearing their hair natural at work and in school. So it's still happening. And here's the most fascinating part. It was Hurricane Maria where the power went out and women didn't have access to their blow dryers and their flat irons, where women started wearing their hair naturally. They were forced to because they
Right.
didn't have the tools to press it out. And you saw a new sort of influx of women who are like, oh, this is how my hair looks naturally because the hurricane took the power out. Isn't that crazy?
It, it's so crazy. So many things have happened with natural disasters, health disasters. Similarly with the pandemic, when you couldn't
Yeah.
go to the hair salon, people had to figure things out. They had to, if you couldn't go for like 2 years, you had to figure something different out.
Seeing yourself differently, right? But then also seeing the beauty. So, as you said, the generational shift is so important.
So incredibly important. You named your book American Negra.
Mhm.
And I want you to tell us what that means. And I want to give a little bit of context. I mentioned my grandmother, who was born in 1889. So she lived to be 101. She lived through so much. First, they were called Negro. Well, actually, first they were called colored. Then they were called Negro, then Black, then African American. Now, if you're mixed with something, it's okay to say you're mixed with something. But these identity, what we call ourselves, has changed over time as we attempt to say who we are and claim ownership of who we are. So let me remind folks, this is Dream Leapers with Harriet Cole. We are sitting here riveted talking to Natasha Alford, who has written a memoir called American Negra. And right now she's going to explain to us what that means.
Well, negra translated means Black woman. And what I wanted people to know was that whatever your language, whatever geographical borders you traverse, you are a Black woman, right? To be Afro Latina is to be a Black woman. And the term negra can be used as a term of endearment or it can be used as an insult. It all depends on the intention behind the word. And so this was a reclamation. This was an embracing of my Blackness and a declaration to the world that I'm proud to be negra. Some people would call me morena because of the actual shade of my skin. but it's a call to action to love Blackness. And it is complicating this narrative, this oversimplification that all Afro Latinos don't want to be Black or don't want to be identified that way. When in fact, there are so many who are proud to be Negro and Negra. And to say American is a declaration as well. It's to say, see us as Americans, right? Those of us, these Afro Latinos who live here in the United States, we've always been here. We're part of history. We're part of civil rights history. We've gone to HBCUs. So we are here. This story is not a marginal story. It's not a niche story. This is a story about the American dream and what is possible in America. And so I hope it paints a portrait that maybe wasn't really there before for people to understand.
I definitely think that it does. I mean, your book provides an education in lots of different ways. I think it definitely shows your personal evolution in coming into who you are, and also this really interesting struggle of kind of claiming, what am I? And because you have brown skin, you describe how you claimed being Black, because in this country still Black and white, and your mommy was like, wait a minute, girlfriend, she's Puerto Rican. She's like, what about us? Talk about that kind of ongoing battle regarding identity with your mother.
Oh, mothers and daughters, we have our things. You know this, Harriet. So that's like a given. And then you want to throw ethnicity in there, and it's like, whoa. My mother comes from a proud culture. I mean, Puerto Ricans, we're proud. We got the flags everywhere. We go to Puerto Rican Day Parade, all of that. And I think what she saw was that I felt like an outsider still. And she was trying to encourage me to take my place, to own the fact that this is my culture. I have a right to claim it. I grew up in this culture, right? It's not something that is foreign to me. But she just didn't understand it from a Black girl's experience here, right? I wanted her to understand, like, I'm walking through the world as a Black woman in a way that you are not, because you're racially ambiguous. So you kind of get a pass. And it was her racial ambiguity that gave us access to a lot of things. I mean, my father, he is a dark-skinned Black man. Our whole family on the Alford side, we are brown people. We originally come from South Carolina and from Florida. And I just saw that they both moved through the world in different ways. She was able to, have white friends, to sort of network, to socialize in a different way. And I know that her color had a role to play in that. And so I was trying to explain to her that, yes, I am Puerto Rican, but my experience being Puerto Rican is different from yours. And so you'll see that tension play out in the book.
And you talk a lot about colorism, which for sure people of color know about this. I'm not sure if people who are of European descent really understand it. I mean, they can look at us and see different shades. If you now go into the makeup store, you're like, whoa, what are all those shades that people have in their skin tone? But the judgment that comes is fascinating. I'll tell you, when my family visited the African American Smithsonian Museum shortly after it opened, and I don't remember how many years, maybe it's about 6, I don't know how many years, however many years ago it was. My mother at that time was old. She's 94 now. So she was something in her 80s, I guess. And as we went by one area, there was a replica of the paper bag test. And it explains what the paper bag test is. And my husband, who is Jamaican, noted it. He saw it. And then I pointed it out to her. And I said, Mommy, you remember this, the paper bag test? And my mother's very, very light skinned. And she's like, nope, I do not remember that. And I was going into an explanation of what it was. We had like 4 generations of our family there, and she was not having it. And it was interesting, Natasha, because I am certain that she was given a pass because she's very light skinned. And she has friends who were not. And just the whole idea that this existed at all was something that like turned her stomach. And a lot of things, for those people, I think so many negative things happen. They just shut the door on those things and do not want to talk about it. She was offended that I wanted to talk about it. And so I stopped. It wasn't necessary to have to talk about it with her, but it's so deeply rooted, and you take it on straight on colorism and how it has impacted you and how it has divided people, both African American and Puerto Rican in your family's case. What does colorism mean to you today? Do you think that there's any difference? Because you have a lot of history in your book, but from whenever then was to now, do you think there's any difference?
The difference that exists today is there's counter programming in the sense of people have their own platforms to share their own narratives. There's an Instagram account, I think it's called like Dark Skin Girls or something like that. And it is just beautiful Black women who are able to center themselves in a way that maybe mainstream media would not do, right? In a way that doesn't sort of exoticize them, but it's just like, we are here. And so every child can see what a society values, what they consider to be beautiful. You don't have to explicitly say it or not. You can deny it and say we're all equal. They know what you think is beautiful. And we show it in who we choose to be the center of stories, who's the star, right? Who's on the cover of the magazines. And for so long, the darker your skin, the more you were excluded, the more you were looked down upon. Even the fact that the word Black at times was used as an insult amongst us. What a shame.
Oh, yeah.
Right? Do you remember? I mean, I remember
Absolutely.
People would be like, oh, you Black, like as if it
Right.
was an insult. So we have healing to do within our own community,
Absolutely.
in addition to, the brokenness that we face outside of our community. So I had to talk about it. And being in between, being somebody who was light skinned on my African American side of the family, I'm the lighter one. And then you go to the Puerto Rican side and I'm the darker one. Right. I know what it is to sort of be between two worlds. And so we have to face it. We have to call it out. And until we truly reach a world where everyone is included and celebrated.
And so that's that play violins, pie in the sky kind of thing until everyone is celebrated. But that's what we're here for, right? As storytellers, it is our job to shine a light. I started my career at Essence Magazine working under Susan Taylor, and she had so many things for us to do to try to help rebalance. So she wanted us to put more women on the cover who were browner, because she said basically wherever, if ever you see a Black woman on a magazine cover, she's usually light skinned. This is, the mid 80s to mid 90s is when I was there. And it was intentional. She made sure that every hair texture was featured in the magazine, but more curls than not, because that's who we are naturally. And she kind of was teaching us editorially to reprogram ourselves so that we could see our people for who they are. Even I ran fashion for a long time, and it was not okay, Natasha, to just put model size women in the magazine. Way before there was inclusive fashion, I had to learn how to dress curvy women, because she said the average Black woman is about a 14, 16 and not a size 6. And I had to learn how to dress, and at first I was mad, and then I realized, nope, that's exactly right. But it was a reprogramming that was conscious in the space of storytelling. And you are at the Grio, at a place where storytelling about people of color is at the center. And you are at the top. So what is your responsibility in that storytelling about Black people and trying to correct the record?
Yes. Well, I'm so glad that you brought up Essence. I just have to really quickly say, I mean, Susan L. Taylor is mentioned in my book because it was an Essence subscription that changed my, life when I was a 12-year-old girl and coming into my sense of self. So I have to thank you also for the work that you did, because that was impacting girls like me who needed it.
Yes.
It really was. And Essence and Jet and Ebony all laid the foundation for the Grio. There is no
Yes.
Grio without these legacy Black media brands. And we are quite simply on the front lines. We're changing narratives. We are combating disinformation at a dangerous time in America where there's so much untruth spouted as truth. There's so much manipulation of information with intent to divide and confuse the Black community, to discourage us from voting, to discourage us from working together and building political coalitions. I mean, it's insidious. We saw it during COVID-19, and we're seeing it now with this election. And so, quite simply, we're on the front lines fighting this war for truth. And I'm so grateful to the Grio. I'm grateful to Byron Allen for investing in us, taking us from I came when the Grio was very humble. You will see this in American Negra. There are 3 of us in a small office working with not much, honestly. And he came and he invested in us, and we are now, a national team under the leadership of Geraldine Mariba, who's done a tremendous job expanding our business, taking us from one website to a podcast network, to a cable TV network, to a streaming app.
Yeah.
So this is what it means to invest in our own brands. I wanted this story to not be one where the Black brand was sort of a place that I came, I earned my stripes, I left. No, I actually stayed, and I'm successful because I stayed.
Yeah. And
And so,
and you tell a great story in the book about Byron Allen that I think is so especially good for people of your generation.
yeah.
Because your generation is accustomed to, if you stay a place for a year, you're lucky.
That's
And
what us millennials do,
that's what
unfortunately.
millennials do. That's
Oh
what
my
Gen X does. I
gosh.
mean, it really is. And I have worked with many, many, many young people in particular, trying to coach them to stay just a little bit longer. And but I loved that if you have a leader like Byron who has a strong vision for his company, that's how you get people to stay.
Mhm.
If you have a vision and you are able to passionately and professionally sell that vision, it makes it easier for people to believe, yeah, I want to invest in this. I want to, and I love how he presented it to you and how it has worked for you. Well, and it works as my mother talks about the circle. If everybody is working together, then it is a circle. It is not one benefiting and the other not. I want to go back because I mentioned this at the beginning, and uh, I went to Howard. You went to Harvard. You wanted to go to Howard. I love that. But you went to Harvard, and it's certainly, first of all, you got to have a window into this extremely elite world of leadership. And you also found Black folk. You found community. And I don't know that people understand that that even exists at these elite institutions. Can you talk about Harvard from that context of embracing you as a young woman? Because that happened in the process of having this elite education.
Harvard was where I found so many parts of myself, and it was in the Black community that I found myself. It was a community full of brilliant, passionate people who cared about our people, who did community service, who were more than their accomplishments, more than their straight A's. They had a vision for changing the world and impacting the world. We spent so many nights in our dorms talking about what we would do when we would graduate and what our dreams would be and the problems that we saw in the world. And so it was a gift. After going to public school, under-resourced public school system, where often Black students were talked about as a problem, to walk into the Ivy League and this institution in particular and see young, smart Black people leading, changing the world. That was a gift. And so I will always cherish it, even with Harvard's shortcomings institutionally, even with its, tragic and horrendous history in terms of ties to slavery. What
Sure.
I found that it is Black Harvard that has been a solve, that has been able to sort of prop me up and push me forward in spite of all the obstacles that Black people have faced at that institution. So I want people to know, if you're considering, you're trying to make a choice, or you want to go, but you're worried about, will you be alone? There is a long legacy of Black people at Harvard and a
Hmm.
whole network of people who will hold you up both while you're there and when you leave.
Good to know. Hey guys, this is Dream Leapers with Harriet Cole. We are talking to Natasha Alford. She has just published her memoir, American Negra, a beautiful read. I recommend that you read it. You're going to learn a lot. I mean, that the thing it's a memoir, so you always learn something from a memoir, but this is a history lesson. There's a lot of history. Natasha did her homework, because and I'm just going to get into the writing aspect of this for a minute, Natasha, because you could just tell your story, but if you want people to understand context and you want them to walk away with some meat, you do have to do research, and clearly you did. You had your story, and then you build it out in so many different ways so that we can understand uh, what was happening, in history, and what some of these institutions and topics were and what they meant. There's something that you explore throughout the book that you made a thesis on while you were at Harvard. This kind of look at Black and Puerto Rican and identity. That included you traveling. And wasn't that when you went to Haiti?
Yes, I went to Dominican Republic, which shares land with Haiti.
Right.
Yeah, and that was a
Well,
life-changing experience.
tell us a little bit about that.
Well, in the Dominican Republic, it was the first time I blended in. I mean,
Mm,
quite simply, I blended in. People walked up to me and they spoke to me in Spanish. They just assumed that I was Dominican. And that was the first time, really, in life that I was like, wow, this is what it feels like to belong.
mm,
And being a Latina is not about looking like J-Lo or having straight hair. This is about culture. It's about community. And people see me as a Latina here, or they
mhm,
see how I could be a Latina. And so that was new for me, especially because of the United States. We think of, again, Latinos are J-Lo and Shakira. That's our image of Latinos. And I want people to know that that's on purpose, that there are people who intentionally crafted a sort of national narrative around Latinidad for their various countries that is white, right? Because
mhm,
of the benefits of whiteness and white privilege. But to be in a country like the Dominican Republic with so many African descendants was enlightening for me. And it set me off onto a journey, which is what the book documents. To come back, I came back to the United States and I said, I have to know more. Like, look
mhm.
at all these people who look just like me and they speak Spanish and we share, a larger pan Latino culture. I need to know more about them. Why don't we talk about this? And so that you will see documented in the book.
I talk to people today who still live along the divide of Black and white and find it difficult to look at the nuances of identity and family history and heritage. And you very honestly talk about in your book how you often have made choices to say you're Black because it's easier than having to explain. I mean, you work at the Grio, which is focused on Black people, and you have brought a diasporic view with you, which I'm sure has helped to expand, but you still get flack sometimes for that.
Yeah. Yeah.
How do you deal with it?
Well, I just see it as people have been denied an education. And I was one of those people too.
Mhm.
So I have great empathy. As much as the human side kicks in, and you want to be defensive. when I had a person confront me about, well, why do you work at a Black outlet? They assumed I was a Dominican. They didn't think I was African American. I say this is what happens when history gets suppressed, when there is an intention to divide us, because African Americans, we migrated to Haiti. How many people knew that after the Haitian Revolution, we went to Haiti? Or even the story of Liberia, which is really complicated, right? There's all these histories where we are in conversation with Black people from other countries.
Yes.
So why the surprise around that? Marcus Garvey, he had a newspaper, and he would have a column that was written in Spanish and written in French, so that what was happening with Black people could be translated for Black people in other countries. I think that is a blueprint. I think it's a model for how we should move about, because Black people are fighting similar fights no matter what geographic borders surround us. This is transnational, this fight for racial justice. And so that's why it matters.
You know, when you speak of Marcus Garvey, I mean, I hope everyone will read about him and really learn. He was so powerful. That's why he had to be minimized. This man understood Pan-Africanism before it was a term. I read a story about him coming from Jamaica and first going to Europe. And I think he was at I don't know, was in the airport or where he was, but he was at a port and saw people, African people, Black people from all over the world. And he's like, wait a minute, this is it. We all need to be connected to each other. And he was successful at having a the boat. He had there was a shipping part of his work that so people could go back and forth together, that his newspaper could travel around the world. And America was like, no, you don't. That's way too powerful. Communication like that. So I agree with you. As a storyteller, both of us as storytellers, you know, it's our job to get that message out, to let people know how powerful we can be if we make that choice. You know, which, well, that's a challenge. And let's talk about this election for a minute.
Yeah. Let's talk about it.
What can you do, we do, our community do to open people's eyes to the importance of paying attention to make a difference?
We have to go beyond a superficial understanding of politics. I think we also have to understand that presidents are not monarchs. They are not kings, right? They work with Congress. You know, we have 3 branches of government. And so when we talk about accountability, it has to be across the board. We have to understand the strategic ways in which people have tried to diminish our vote, to weaken the vote, the gerrymandering that is going on, but also the legislation that's been proposed that has been blocked, particularly by one party, right? And again, this is not partisan. I don't say this representing any particular party. That's just the truth, right? And journalists, we need to call it like it is. The Republican Party has often blocked legislation that could have benefited everyone. Didn't matter if you were in a red or a blue state, because of the politics of it. And what happened with immigration right now, or pretty recently, is a good example of that. That immigration bill could have stopped the crisis that we have at the border, but it would have been too much of a win for Joe Biden. And therefore, Donald Trump called on it to not pass. And Republicans followed suit, even though this was a bipartisan bill. So we have to have our eyes open. We have to see when people are playing politics with our lives, right? And it doesn't mean that a party gets a pass or a politician gets a pass to just come into office and they don't owe us anything. You absolutely have to hold politicians accountable for a particular agenda, but understand the existential threat that some parties represent, that some candidates represent, that's about more than political ideology. We're talking about preserving democracy and having somebody who will completely upend it. And so that is my
Wow,
soapbox.
that's good. No, thank you. No, thank you. We appreciate that soapbox. And that was from Natasha Alford, everybody. She is, a supreme journalist over there at the Grio, holding it down, teaching us, educating us, sharing news about Black folks so that we can be in the know. She has just written her memoir, American Negra. You need to read it right now. It's a great read. You're going to love it. There's something, your book is very, very honest, and I appreciate that. You talk about something that is very tender, your health.
Yes.
And, you are still a young woman, but as a much younger woman, you started having pretty catastrophic health challenges. And I so appreciate you writing about the different parts of your journey with health, because especially for women of color, we ignore it all. We ignore it all. I just talked to somebody who had Tamala Jones, the actress,
Oh,
who's
she's great.
who's just in this incredible film right now. When she was a young woman, she had a brain aneurysm and didn't know, but her arm was frozen, her body was frozen. She went to work and finished a film with her arm frozen, and then went to the hospital, and they said, "It's a good thing that you're still alive." Yours wasn't that bad, but it was pretty bad. You had some pretty significant things happen that you ignored. Why do you think? What is it in us that says all this stuff can happen to our bodies, but we have to keep working, we have to go for it? And what can you tell folks so perhaps they will make a different choice?
We think health is a luxury.
Mm,
We think to slow down rather is a luxury,
yes,
right? I don't have time for that. I have all these
right.
responsibilities. I got kids to feed. I got a household to run. And because of the trauma that we have endured in this country, we feel that if generations before us could push through,
That's
why
right.
can't we push through? And so it is not shocking that many of us look past our pain because our examples have been our mothers and foremothers having to look past their pain. But I believe freedom. This is truly what freedom is. It is being able to rest. I love Tricia Hersey. She's another author. The nap bishop, as
Ah,
they call her, the bishop of naps. And I
oh,
am a
that's my
faith.
favorite naps.
I love it. I'm a faithful follower because she's like, we've done enough. We don't have to prove ourselves anymore. Why can't we rest? And
Mm,
so it's a mindset shift, especially if you're type A or you're kind of like an overachiever, like we are. You know that the hustle is what is rewarded in this society. But what good is the hustle if we're not here to enjoy it, right? And
mm,
so I wanted to attack the taboo and stigma of talking about health, particularly when you're young, because so many women were told our value is in our looks and
yes.
our bodies and what we can do with our bodies. And I want us to be free enough to care for ourselves, our souls, but especially our bodies while we are here.
It's powerful. And, one of the conditions that you talk about, and I thank you for naming it because I think it helps people, is lupus. And I have a number of friends, uh, women of color, who have lupus and who are very successful and continue to be,
Mhm.
which is, I think, the scary part. Do I say anything because will I lose my job? Will I lose whatever my standing is? Each of the women was the absolute overachiever and now has had to kind of figure out something else. How are you navigating dealing with health challenges and having a big, powerful career? Because you're you're much better at it now than you were, right? So
Yeah.
what are you doing to help create a bit more balance?
Well, I've learned to say no.
Mm,
I've learned to say no, which sounds really simple. But again, when you are climbing or you're really ambitious, the key to success, you think, is saying yes to every single thing. And I've also learned my body. So I start to know when certain symptoms are picking up.
Mm,
I can feel the aches and pains, and I intervene immediately to address that. But lastly, I would say I've just been a better advocate for myself. I went and I didn't just go to the doctor that was nearby, or the one that pops up when you first do your insurance check. I went and I sought out the best, because I said,
mm,
this is a lifelong journey for me. And
mhm,
so, in the same way that I have made investments in trying to get the best for myself in other areas of my life, I need to surround myself with the best people who can help me to manage my health. And so, it takes time and it takes a priority shift, but again, it's so worth it. And so, listening to your body,
mhm.
saying no, regulating your time, and really valuing yourself enough to care about what you do with your body, I think makes a huge difference. I'm still on the journey, but certainly not where I started.
I know you have a young child, and I remember, Natasha, when I had my daughter, I was an older mom. I was at a crescendo in my career, and I was like, "Uh-oh, what is that feeling? Do I have the flu? Oh, no, I'm pregnant."
How
And so
old were you?
I
How
was
old were you?
42.
Wow. Well,
Yes.
I mean, you look amazing, so I'm
Well,
not
thank you.
surprised, but
So,
that's
no,
great.
as they say, black don't crack, right?
Right.
But
Okay.
I literally was 42, and, I mean, the best blessing of my life, but also I was so afraid that my world would fall apart because it was constructed not based on having a child. And
Mhm.
it turned out that, sure, things were challenging, but it turned out to be the best possible thing for me. But I did have to change my juggle, right?
Yeah. Yes.
But what about you? Because you have a young child, so you're still in the throes of juggle is real.
Yes. Oh, I want people to know I didn't start feeling normal again until, I mean, he's about to be 3. I'm like, what were those first 2 years? We were in a fog those 2 years. We weren't sleeping. You're kind of like a zombie walking
Yes.
around just trying to be normal. So give yourself grace, that there's that. And I think I tried to do that to some degree. I mean, I got my CNN contract as I was pregnant. No one knew. So I was like, wow, this is happening. Why are these things happening at the same time? That was my reaction, because CNN called me. I was 4 months pregnant and nobody knew. And I was like, why now? Why would you call now? I wanted you to call so many years ago. Um, but but the key, I think, is, again, not saying yes to everything, but saying yes to the things that matter. And so I've been able to maintain with CNN, maintain with the Grio, and prioritize my son, because I don't feel the need to be every place at every time, right? I don't
I
go to
love
every event. I'm not on TV every single night, even though, I would love to be and they call me. I need every piece of this puzzle to feel whole, right? I need my son. All these things make me feel like Natasha. And so just being at peace with that and trusting God that if He gave it to you, it's there. You don't have to be insecure or worry about where's it going to go. Just be present, and know
Amen.
when enough is enough. And so that's what it's been for me.
Amen to that. I'll just tell you, when I learned I was pregnant, I just finished a book manuscript, and I was in the middle of taping a 13-episode TV series. I told no one, and I didn't pop until I was 6 months pregnant. We finished at 5.5. So
Wow.
I was like, "Woo," I was so lucky.
Yep.
Afterward, they were like, "Oh, that's why you went from the venti coffee to the venti tea."
The little shifts, the little
The little
subtle.
shifts.
Mhm.
Natasha, congratulations. It's so lovely to meet you, and I loved your book, and I hope everyone reads it and enjoys it and learns.
This has been an honor. Thank you for having me. And thank you for all that you've done to open the doors for people like me.
Thank you. Good luck to you. And thank you to all of you for tuning in to Dream Leapers with Harriet Cole. Get your copy of American Negra now. It's beautiful. And guess what? At the back of the book, there's a bibliography, tons more books that you can read to learn more about our history and culture, many things that I bet you don't know. Until next time, have a great day and make it count.